What a fantastic crowd. Thank you all for coming. Good morning. My name is Michael, and I'll be refuting the speech about the Electoral College.
Yeah.
The advocate claimed that the Electoral College is incompatible with democratic ideology, which states that everyone's vote should count equal. His secondary claims were, number one, that individual votes from each state are not equal to less populated ones. His second secondary claim is that the Electoral College participants are not bound to the votes of the public, and he cited an example of Bush versus Gore. In regards to the advocate's claim of fact, the advocate failed to clearly identify what he meant by a democratic ideology. Whose democratic ideology? Yours? Mine? The Pope's? We don't know for sure. I looked on Wikipedia and there were 13 variants of democratic ideology. Now, the Founding Fathers created a republic that said we would have an informed electorate that would decide who the president was. And according to the Federalist Papers in number 10, James Madison wrote, and I want to make sure I get this right, that what distinguished a democracy from a republic was that the former became weaker as it got larger and suffered more violently from the effects of faction, whereas a republic could get stronger as it got larger and combats faction by its very structure. The Founding Fathers wanted a system via the means to elect a president. Now on to the first secondary claim. The advocate stated that individual votes from each state are not equal to less populated ones. That fact is not in dispute. That is how the Electoral College is supposed to work. Every 10 years we decide how many representatives that a state gets. When the Electoral College is formed, each state gets a vote for each member of Congress. One for each senator, one for each representative. Those facts are not in dispute. I think what the problem was that he says that's not fair. According to the Huffington Post article, it said this so-called indirect election process has been the subject of criticism and attempted reform through though the proponents of it say that it ensures the rights of the smaller states to stand as an important piece of American federalist democracy. And that's the key. It's an American federalist democracy, not a one vote for one vote kind of thing. Now on to the secondary claim number 2, that the Electoral College is not bound by popular vote. In the year 2000, when Bush beat Gore by the Electoral College, but not by the popular vote, there was a large outcry, and my advocate said so. The thing is that the framers of the Constitution created a republic with an informed electorate to elect the president, not a democracy. Now, according to the Federalist Papers, James Madison wrote it was great. It was equally desirable that the immediate election should be made by men most capable of analyzing the qualities adapted to the station and acting under circumstances favorable to deliberation and to a judicious combination for all the reasons and inducements which were proper to govern their choice. They wanted the smart people that were chosen by the people to elect the president. That's what the framers wanted. When we elected Bush to be president, there were no laws that were broken. Bush won the Electoral College. Bush became president. Was that a popular vote? No, but it is the way that we designed our system. In conclusion, the advocate failed to define what a democratic ideology was. Also, there was no dispute about how the Electoral College was formed. And the secondary claim number 2 was that, well, the popular vote doesn't necessarily have to be the Electoral College vote. And that's the way that it's supposed to be. Thank you very much.
That was good. I was curious to see who got mine. I'm proud of you.
Yeah, me too.
We'll see how it
Terrible.
416? Oh, I could have told a story.
Yeah, you could have told us all about Germany.
Yeah.
The king of the Nazis.
And the king of the Nazis.
That's fine.
Yeah.
We'll see if I'm
Germany is a fully democratic country.
Germany was in January.
You know who Mark Shaw was? She was the owner of the Cincinnati Reds. And she was quoted one time saying that Hitler actually had some really good ideas. It was completely taken out of context, but when
Yeah.
she said that, it was.
All right, Michael. I think that you identify the advocate's claims pretty clearly. There's a good preview there. Your main dispute on the first point is not that the state distribution of votes is not the way the advocate described, but that there is a reason that they are distributed that way. And you have an argument about these democratic ideologies, and you say that the advocate doesn't really define what they mean by the democratic ideologies. And then you attempt to define what the republic is that we have. And I gotta say, anytime you get James Madison being quoted in defense of your position, you're in pretty good shape, because you've got, you know, the primary architect of the Constitution and the fourth president of the United States who said, this is what we're looking for, this is what the whole objective was. Now, one of the things you might point out is if there's a dispute over whether or not that is the right objective, that's an issue of value, not an issue of fact. All right, and so when it comes to the issue of fact, there's no controversy that this is how the system works. So there's no argument here. There is controversy over whether or not this is democratic, and I believe that it's democratic under the Republican principles that the Constitution created in this situation. And I think you make that argument. I think you could make it a more clear declarative statement, but if we're listening to what you're saying, I think everybody will understand the point that you're making on that. So when you get to that first point, I mean, you even do say at one point there's a question about what is fair, and I was waiting for you to follow up and say, and by the way, that's not the kind of dispute that we're dealing with here. This, the question of whether or not it's fair is, it's not part of the current discussion that we're having. Fairness is something that we can certainly talk about at another time, but the question of whether or not does it work? Does it produce an outcome that is consistent with the Constitution and the way it's designed to work? Is there anything about the system that is harming somebody? Has the advocate demonstrated any of those things? I think that's kind of the way you need to summarize that argument. But I thought you had a good point there. And then on the second point, you basically say, well, he's correct that Bush lost the popular vote but won the Electoral College, but that's the way the system is designed, primarily to give, like you said earlier, to give power to states under a federal system so that they aren't all ignored, they all have some say in what is going on. And we're back to the same question then. So why is that a bad thing? How did it hurt democracy? Are we less democratic because we had that outcome? Well, did the advocates show that we were less democratic, except by the standard of popular vote versus, and we didn't get the result of the popular vote? I think there are arguments that you could probably make about popular votes. For instance, one of the reasons that people are iffy about a popular vote, they started to do a recount in Florida. If you didn't have the Electoral College, and the election was as close as it was with 500,000 votes and out of 100 million votes, we'd have been having recounts after recounts after recounts. And I think there's a good argument to be made that says one of the advantages of this system is that it helps preserve the notion that the elections are working in a consistent way, as opposed to people trying to cherry pick votes someplace here and there. And
I actually cut out a piece of my speech because I thought it was too long, about how James Carville did an analyzation of it and said the real reason that Gore lost is because he didn't carry his home state of Tennessee.
Yeah.
So that was, but I cut that out. So.
Yeah. And there's just a whole lot of
all day long.
Yeah, and it goes back and forth on those kinds of things all the time. There are a lot of things to talk about here. The question is whether or not they're issues of fact, and I think there is a problem with some of that. I thought you did a good job summarizing at the end of the presentation. That worked very well. And you do a nice job speaking to the audience. I mean, you know what you're talking about, and you just explain it to us for the most part. And when you're quoting material, it comes across very effectively. So you did have a little bit more time, so there was an opportunity to maybe make some of those other arguments.
I thought I was going on.
All right. Thank you.